Okay, good morning. Thank you all for joining. We're holding here in the Gemara, in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Hatzvi-Bais 16b. And at this point, the Gemara doesn't go through to explain every verse, as we've been doing till now, every pasuk in the Megillah. Rather, very peripherally, the Gemara will explain one pasuk here, one verse there. So at this point, the Gemara will now discuss one of the anomalies of the Megillah. In the Megillah, we list the 10 sons of Haman. And the Gemara actually said a few halachas about it. First of all, when you list the 10 sons of Haman, you have to read them all in one breath. In addition to that, the vav of Vayizasa is a large vav. Here it is. So 10 sons of Haman, you read it in one breath. The vav is a large vav, and it's bent over on the top. You read them in one breath because they were all killed at one shot. That was part of the miracle that they were all killed simultaneously. And until the last one was killed, it wasn't yet complete, the complete redemption of the Jewish people. Each one was a commander of 500 soldiers, of 50 soldiers. Altogether in Shushan, it says the Jews killed 500 men, 500 people. Right? The last words on this column is Chamesh Meyos Ish. 500 people, and we say that as well. And as part of the long breath, because each of these sons of Haman were in command of another 50 people, and altogether there are 500 people that were killed, 500 enemies plus the 10 sons of Haman. In addition, it's brought in a medrash that the 10 sons of Haman each gave Haman 1,000 silver talents. If you remember, Haman gave the king 10,000 silver talents. Aseres alafim kikar kasef. So each one of them gave him 1,000 silver talents, altogether 10,000. So Haman being killed was not complete until his sons were killed as well. So we read them all in one breath. Now we're holding 16b. Hello. 3. And the Gemara will now explain the way the 10 sons of Haman are written. So, throughout the Torah, everything is written plain text, plain lines. Sometimes you have a new paragraph, a psucha or a stuma, an open paragraph, one that starts on a new line, sometimes one that does not start on a new line. Here it just skips half a line. Sometimes you'll have in the Chumash, you'll have something skipping a line, going to the new page, going to a new line. But like you have here in the Megillah, is very unique. That the line, the column starts off with the word ish, and the words of the 10 sons of Haman are written in such a manner. You have a word in the beginning of a line, an empty space in the middle, and a word at the end of the line. And that's how it goes onwards. All the 10 sons of Haman. Many Megillahs write the 10 sons of Haman as its own column.
Is the first word Ish?
Ish is the first word.
No, but was that Ish means man, but
right.
That's his name also?
No. It's part of the words before, Chamesh Meyos, 500 men. The Jews killed 500 men. Here is the Megillah of the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash wrote. Sorry, I can't interrupt in the middle of the show.
Oh, sorry.
And it's like most Chabad Megillahs follow this, is that it doesn't take up an entire column, rather it takes up just the top of the column. But it's written in the same type of way. You have a word in the beginning of the line, an empty space, and a word at the end of the line. It's called a riyach agabe a riyach, a brick on top of a brick.
Oh, really? Oh, it's like actually according to one opinion, maybe everybody says that they don't remember. All of them having been hung, right?
Mhm.
What?
They were hung one on top of the other. Very good.
Yeah.
Actually, the Gemara says that.
Hmm.
So they were. This is how it's written in the Torah. If you have Az Yashir, it's Parshas B'Shalach. So you have regular Parsha, Psucha and Summa. Here's a new Parsha, a new paragraph, which begins on the same line. Here's a new paragraph, which starts at the beginning of the next line. And then you have the Shir Shal Yam, the song of the sea, Az Yashir, which we say every day during davening. Az Yashir, M'Sukkah de Zimra. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu stretches his hand over the sea, and here you have Az Yashir. Az Yashir in the Torah is written, it's called a Riach Agabe Levena. A small brick over a big brick. A big brick over a small brick. Az Yashir, the first line is straight text, but then you have Lamor, and then you have a word in the beginning of the line, an empty space. Words in the middle, an empty space. Words at the end of the line. Next one, they alternate. The beginning and end of a line always has words, but they make the words should be under the hollow space of the line above. And then you alternate. So then you have a word at the beginning and the end of the line. And the next word should be under the hollow space of the line above. This is called a Riach Agabe Levena. A stone over a brick over a stone. One is the larger ones, the larger area will be called the stone, the smaller area will be called the brick. In the Torah, you have 8 different shiras, 8 different songs written in the Torah.
Hazinu, right? I think is one song, right?
Hazinu is a song, so let me bring up Hazinu on the screen.
Hazinu.
Here's Hazinu, right? Hazinu is written in the same way the sons of Haman are written. You have words in the beginning of the line, an empty space, and words at the end of the line. This is a Parsha Hazinu. Almost the entire Parsha, except for the last Aliyah, is written in such a way.
There has to be some sort of deeper meaning.
Hazinu is a song. We'll get into that. We'll get into some of the deeper meanings, and then you'll do some research and come back to us with the rest. Hazinu is a song. So all songs in the Torah in general are written like this. Hazinu Hashmayim V'Adabera, Sishma Eretz Imrefri. It's called a Riach Agabe Levena. Songs which are written like this. So let's read the Gemara inside, discussing why the sons of Haman are written in such a way, and why different shiras, different songs are written in different ways. Just move this on. There it is. Okay, so let's read the Gemara inside. So 16b3, second in the bottom of the first side. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, says Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, Darash Rav Shela ish Kfar Tamarta. Rav Shela, a man of the village of Tamarta, modern day Israel. You have a village called Timras, somewhere in Galilee, not Galilee, Yehuda and Judah, which is also, they say it's near the original Timrata, but he's brought down, several of Shela's brought down. Whenever he's brought down, he's usually Darash. Darash means like a homiletical interpretation, not like a halachic or a law, but rather more of a gadata type of interpretation. Kol Ashiris, all of the songs which are written in the Torah and Tanakh, there are 8 of them. First one is when the Jews crossed the sea. There's a one when the Jews went, they sang a song for the Be'er, the well of Miriam, Hazinu, the kings of Canaan, which are killed in Yeshua. There's list off 31 kings. The song of Devorah, the song of David in Shmuel-Beis, and the song of Koheles, and the 10 sons of Haman. So altogether 8 songs. Kula nichtaves ariach agabe levena, levena agabe ariach. All of them are arranged in such a way when they're written in the Torah, in a manner that there's an empty space over a brick and a brick upon a half a brick, meaning every line of the song is divided into text, which is called the half brick, separated by a blank space called the whole brick, and then another bit of text. Now, a song is in general either when we thank Hashem for saving us, but specifically when a Russia has a downfall, when a Russia is destroyed, we praise Hashem. That's what happened when we crossed the sea. Hazinu is a song Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jews about the kings who will fall in front of the Jews, the 31 kings who were killed, Rishaim who were killed. So either a miracle that Hashem did for us, like the well of Miriam, or when a Russia, an evil person, got destroyed, and then avoid Rishaim Rino, when an evil man, a Russia, has a downfall, then you rejoice, you're happy, and we sing a song. Chutz, except for Mishirazu Umalche Kinaan. There are two exceptions to the rule, referring to the list of Haman's sons, and the song listing the kings of Canaan who were defeated by Yeshua. She'ariach agabe ariach ulevena agabe levena. They are written in such a way that unlike Az Yashir, which is a writing over empty space over writing over the empty space, and it alternates. Unlike there, the sons of Haman are writing over writing and empty space over empty space. My time, and what's the reason for this? Because it's giving a hint over here. Because shaloi tehei takuma lamapalasan, in order that the enemies of the Jews should never rise from their downfall. When you build a wall, so you have to, if you build a wall only very narrow, no width to it, the wall is not going to stand. It's not going to last. So the enemies of the Jews, right? If you have a wide area, let's say if you're walking on a wide walkway, it could be 20 feet in the air, but you're not scared to walk. You're walking on a little tightrope, right? You have to be very careful how you're walking, even if it's 4 feet up in the air. So in a similar sense, when the text is very wide, let's say like by Az Yashir, when the text is wide, so then it's saying that you have a wide area to walk, you're more secure. But if it's very small, like it is by the sons of Haman, like very small area, then they're never going to be able to stand up and become solid, become standing again. So if you only have a very narrow space to walk, you're very scared to move. You're not going to want to move from where you are. This is the way the Rashi explains it. And therefore, the sons of Haman and the kings of Canaan, who the Jews conquered, were written in such a manner to hint to you that they will never have the ability to stand up after they fell down. So the sons of Haman never became powerful again, and the kings of Canaan also never became powerful again. Ha'azinu, although Hazinu is, much of it is talking about how the Jews should listen to the Torah, but it also talks about Harninu Goyim Amay Kidam Avad Avikim. Hashem will avenge the Jews from all of those who persecute them during the time of exile, during the Gullus. As we go on, Hashem will listen to them. Ashiv Nakam Litzarai, Musani Hashalim. I will have vengeance against those who have pain the Jewish people, and I will pay back all those who hate me, says Hashem. My Hashem says, my arrows will be satiated with blood, and my sword of vengeance against those who persecuted the Jews will be full of eating flesh of the enemies. So Hashem says, since we're talking about the enemies of the Jews will never will be destroyed by Hashem, and therefore in the same manner, it's written in the same way as the sons of Haman. Text over text, and it's empty space in the middle. Therefore, in order to say that our enemies of the Jews will never be able to stand up and hold their head up high again. So all of these songs are written in such a way that, in general, it's being supported, meaning that the one in the middle is being supported by the ones under it. This one's being supported by the ones under it, except for the ones which talk about the Rishayim and evil people or enemies of the Jews, which are either the 31 kings of Canaan, Haman's sons, are enemies in the future, and all these people will have a downfall forever. The Ben Ish Chai writes that most of us, we don't really have Nach, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim written in on like in Sefer Torah type of writing. We just have Sfarim, because our Haftarah that we read it from a book, from a Sefer. There are certain places where they read Haftarah from Nevi'im and Ksuvim, and you could buy it. I think even here in this shul, they actually have a Nevi'im written the way it is like on a Sefer Torah. So over there, it has a different song. So for example, the song of David HaMelech, the day that Hashem saved him from his enemies, it also has a song, and it's written in the same type of manner, meaning text over text and empty space over empty space, because David's enemies, although they were Jewish enemies, who were Doeg, who tattled on him to Shaul HaMelech, Achitophel, all these people, they were killed, and they were destroyed from this world and the next world. They didn't get Olam Haba. So they never had a tekuma. They never were able to stand up afterwards. And so to Shaul HaMelech was an enemy of David, and it says David won over his enemy. The Song of David is written in the same type of manner, but also Shaul HaMelech, once the kingship was taken away from him, the royalty was taken away from Shaul, it was cut off, and it never came back to his family.
But at the same time, he got Olam Haba, he just didn't get Olam Haba.
Right, he got Olam Haba, and his descendants are Esther and Mordechai, of course. But in royalty, Shaul was never came back. In the midst of Minei Melech, Shaul was greater than the kings of David, but that was his problem. He couldn't relate to this world in a good way, and therefore the way he related to the world was in a very erratic manner. And he became mad, and he thought he knew better than the Navi Shmuel, but he was necessary to start off. When you start when a rocket ship takes off, you need to have 3 big fuel rockets, and they fall off later on. But you need them in order to make the rocket ship able to leave the gravity of the earth. So in a similar sense, in order to start off this whole idea of a kingdom among the Jews, having a king, you needed someone powerful like Shaul. But he did his it was only one generation. So that's how the Ben Ish Chai explains over here.
Am I correct in saying that Shaul was only a king for 2 years?
Correct.
Not much.
2 years, maybe 2 years and 6 months, and 6 months of good kingship, and then about 2 years of down kingship. Or they say that he was a king for a year after Shmuel passed away. So it was like, but he was a king for only about 2 years, until David afterwards became the king. If you wrote the Megillah in a way not in this manner, meaning if you happen to write the Megillah almost like it says here in the Chumash, sons of Haman, like this, then Megillah is not valid. And it's possible you cannot read the Megillah from such a Megillah. That's how it paskins in Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. In a Sefer Torah, the way a Torah has to be written is very exact. A Sefer Torah, we have what's called sirtut. We have lines in a Sefer Torah that are scratched out. Now, we're going to learn more about this a little bit more in depth in Daf Yud Ches, in another 2 blocks. In the next parak, we'll talk much more. We're going to talk about writing a Megillah. So we're going to talk about when do you need to have a Megillah written. So in a Megillah, you need sirtut, you need lines written. In Nevi'im, you need lines. In Mezuzah and Tefillin, you need lines. But we're going to discuss if a Sefer Torah needs lines, and the example is a Sefer Torah, is a Megillah to be like a Sefer Torah. But Tefillin do not need lines. So Tefillin are actually, Mezuzahs do need lines, and Tefillin do not need lines. And that's the way it's actually
What's that meaning by lines? There's,
like in Yed Aliyah, you see the lines in the Torah. It's called sirtut.
I know they're straight across. so-
Right.
But is there invisible lines? or-
No, we're talking about those lines. There's a line underneath, not written with ink, but scratched with like a metal implement. All right. One last thing here in the Gemara. Rabbeinu Tam writes a little bit different over here. That a riach and levena have a different meaning. He writes a brick and a half brick. I'm talking about now the small part of the writing and the wide part of the writing. He doesn't call the empty part any the riach or levena. And he explains that when the line when you have a wall that you're built and you only have a certain amount of bricks, so then you want it to be steady, you can't have them next to each other. They have to overlap. And John, look at any building that you see, right? Look out the wall at that brick wall over there, right? If you want to have a wall steady, you don't have a brick on top of a brick. You have a brick overlapping 2 bricks. That's how you want the wall to be steady. But if you have a brick on top of a brick, even if they're all together, it's not going to be steady because nothing really holding the rows of bricks together. Also, if you want to build it higher, you're not going to be able to build it higher unless it's one over the other. So, therefore, you make it in such a manner they should have one over the other. Let's continue with the Gemara. Amar Rav, says Rav, Itema Rav Shmuel Bar Marta. Some say it was Rav Shmuel. Sorry, skip the line over here. Let's continue. Let's go back in the Megillah. It says, "Vayomer hamelech leEsther hamalka." After the 10 sons of Haman were killed, on that day, the king gets a report. How many enemies did the Jews kill? This is one of Rabbi Ruddle's jokes. How do we know that there were no credit cards in the time of the Megillah?
Oh,
Because it says right over here, "Uvabiza le'shalchu es yadam." In the Visa, they did not touch. There's no Visa cards.
You put that MasterCard.
Where do you see that MasterCard?
Well, they don't have Visa, but they could have had MasterCard.
Maybe they had.
American Express.
It says on that day, the king got a report. How many enemies of the Jews did the Jews kill on that day, on the 13th of Adar?
oh.
And the king said to Esther the queen, B'Shushan Habira, in Shushan, the capital. Right, there was a Jew takes a taxi. He's an immigrant from the old country, and he says he wants to see the sights of the United States, and he comes and he says, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to Washington, D.C." Someone asked him, "You know what Washington, D.C. stands for?" He says, "Of course, Washington, the capital." Right? So the king says, "B'Shushan Abira," in Shushan, the capital. The Jews killed 500 men. The Eisa Seres bnei Haman, and also the 10 sons of Haman. Bishor medinois hamelech ma'asu. What have they done in the other countries of the king? In addition, the king says, what is your request that should be granted to you? What is your petition? And it shall be done. And the Esther and the king Esther says, if it pleases a king, let tomorrow be granted as well to the Jews in Shushan, to do as they have done today. In other countries of the king, they fought their enemies and killed 75,000 enemies. In Shushan, they killed 500, but there are many enemies in Shushan itself, in the capital. So he says, let us have permission to kill our enemies tomorrow as well. And let Haman's 10 sons hang on the gallows. Whether it was these 10 sons or another extra 10 sons, it's a question, but the other 10 sons of Haman to hang on the gallows. The king ordered it should be done so. And he gave the decree in Shushan that Jews could fight their enemies. And then he hung the 10 sons of Haman on the tree. So the Gemara will now explain like this. Achashverosh was actually very upset, very angry. Why was he angry? He's angry. He's got to report the Jews killed 75,000 people. 75,000 tax-paying citizens. I know he wouldn't have been upset if all the Jews got killed, but 75,000 people were killed, plus 500 people were killed. And these were maybe people of his army. The king was upset. How do you see he was upset? From the words of the pasuk. The words of the pasuk are, the Jews killed, he could have just said they killed 500 people. But he says Harga Yehudim v'abed, and destroyed 500 people. Why add this extra word? V'abed. Abed means something is lost. You have to write something off as a loss. That's what it means, abed. Aveda, you lose something. So the king wasn't just telling a report to Esther, the Jews killed 500 enemies. They were saying ve'abed, and they destroyed. I lost now 500 people. The king's upset about it. So says the Gemara. The king told to Esther the queen, in Shushan, the capital, the Jews killed 500 men. But then he ends off very softly, and he says, what is your request, and I shall grant it to you. What is your petition, and it shall be done. He ends off very softly. So why was he starting off speaking in a way of anger and ended up speaking in a very soft manner to Esther? Says the Gemara, even though Esther didn't yet request anything, Achashverosh himself offered to Esther, is there anything else that you want? What happened? Says the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Abahu, says Rabbi Abahu, Melamed, it comes to teach you, Shebamalach v'satrei al priv. As Achashverosh started speaking to Esther, saying how I'm all upset, how the Jews killed so many of their enemies, so many people, a malach, an angel, came and slapped Achashverosh on his mouth, stopped him what he was saying. Meaning started off with a complaint what the Jews were doing, and ended up he had to be stopped in the middle from what he was saying, and therefore he realized that he can't say anything negative, and therefore he spoke softly to Esther afterwards. The Jews in the rest of the countries took them 2 days, and therefore the Jews in Shushan celebrate Purim on the second day of Purim, on Tesvav Adar, because on the 13th and 14th of Adar they're fighting their enemies, and we have therefore Shushan Purim. And if you remember in the beginning of the Megillah, on Mesechta, we went quite at length all about could you read the Megillah in an unwalled city on Shushan Purim, if Purim comes out to be on Shabbos. Now, because of that, in every city that had a wall from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, therefore we keep Purim on the second day. And as we explained, it wasn't just only because of the commemoration of Shushan. The Jews in the walled cities, they felt more secure. They felt that we're safe from our enemies. And then realized that there's nothing to save them. And then they realized they had to fight their enemies as well. Therefore, they only felt truly safe on the 15th of Adar, and that's when they celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar. So to explain this according to Chassidus, this idea that the people in the unwalled cities make Purim on the 14th of Adar, they can already start reading the Megillah from the 11th of Adar. Unlike every other Yom Tov, which has 2 days, because we're not sure of what day it is, we keep 2 days. On Purim, we keep 2 days, not because we're not sure what day it is, but because we know what day it is. Purim symbolizes getting rid of Haman, getting rid of Amalek. Amalek is representing chutzpah. For no reason. Amalek came and was fighting against the Jews for no reason when they left Egypt. What that means is when someone has arrogance for no reason, chutzpah for no reason, who was the one to get rid of this klipa of Amalek? Who was the one who fought against Amalek? The very first one was in the desert. Who fought against Amalek? Yeshua, right? Moshe and Yeshua. Moshe was very humble. The most humble man who ever existed. The exact opposite of arrogance and chutzpah is humbleness, Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore the people of Moshe, Yeshua and Moshe were the ones who had to fight against Amalek. The answer to Amalek is bittul. And therefore it depends, in order to fight Amalek, which is what we celebrate on Purim, there's two, depending where you're holding, that's how you fight Amalek. You have a Jew of an open city or a Jew of a walled city. A Jew of a walled city, a wall means I have separations, which means there's separations between my good and my bad in my life. I separate between the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. And so a Jew who walls himself in, separates himself from the whole outside influences of the world, he could think to himself, I'm safe from Amalek. I'm safe from any influences of arrogance. I am safe from anything on the outside. And we should know it's not true. Even the Jews in a walled city has to celebrate Purim and be saved from Amalek. You could be a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, daven, be a good Jew, pay your taxes on time, be like everybody else. And still, he could have to have a struggle with Amalek. Hashem, even such a person, a Jew who's walled off, a Jew who's a very great Jew, Hashem tells him, choose life. V'charta b'chayim. Gaiva, arrogance, is coming from Amalek. It's chutzpah. If God forbid you make a place for Amalek to enter, Amalek, he'll be the first one to fight the Jews. Meaning, when a person's personal avodah and service of Hashem, it's that the 7 nations of Canaan and the 7 nations in Israel did not come to fight the Jews first. The first one was Amalek. Even though Amalek got terribly beaten, but the other nations followed afterwards. Canaani followed them. The other nations followed in the path of Amalek. Once somebody lets, even a Torah scholar, gaiva, arrogance, get in, that lets in everything else, all the other 7 bad midas of other averos to happen, and they are not our friends or enemies who want to destroy every vestige of godliness. So therefore, a Jew who's in a walled city celebrates Purim has to get rid of his own Amalek, his own arrogance, his own gaiva. And he celebrates it on the 15th of Adar. The 15th of Adar is when the moon is at its peak. 14th of Adar, the moon is not at its peak. The 15th of Adar is when you have a full moon, which represents when your light of a Jew, the Jews are compared to the moon, are shining at its peak. So you have a Jew who's living in a way of a walled city has to elevate himself and go out of his limitations to have a full moon. To his Torah should be shining so strongly inside of him, in order that Amalek should not come. And that's what Purim is. Purim is ad la yada. We don't know the difference of good and bad. Bad is so insignificant over here. Those are the Jews who are on a great level. The Jews in the walled city, it's one of the levels of holiness. Of a Jew who's not in a walled city, which means a Jew in an open city, is most Jews like us who are struggling with the Yetzer Hara on a day-by-day basis. And we have Gaiva, arrogance, which is Amalek inside of us. And we do the best we could. And so we celebrate Purim on the 14th of Adar, which is Erev of the full moon, right before. Meaning we're striving to get to the completion, to become to the ultimate. You have a level down, lower. Those who read the Megillah on the 11th, you know what they're called? Remember, the Bnei HaKfarim, the people of the
Villages.
towns and the villages.
Yeah.
When the Gemara wants to say, give an example of a chiddush, something unique, is a ben kfar sharas hamelech, a villager who saw the king. For them, right, the villager walks into a place and he sees a large town. It's something very unique for them, right? Mr. Nadich said today that his grandfather, first time he saw TV, he thought people were talking to him, and he straightened his tie. Right? So a villager sees something new, it's something very unique. So they're even on the lower level. They read the Megillah on the 11th or 12th. They're not even up almost, they're not holding on the level of the 14th, almost by the new moon. And for such a person also, they have to fight and destroy their Amalek as well. It says the fear of the Jews fell on all of their enemies. Because when every single Jew serves Hashem properly, we put everything aside and we serve Hashem, then the enemies of the world look at the Jew and then they have awe and fear of a Jew. Even when a Jew eats and drinks, it's recognizable. He's not doing it in the way of the nations of the world. He's doing it only in order to serve Hashem. We make a bracha before, we make a bracha after. And we eat in order to be healthy, not in order to enjoy it. And then when a Jew lives in such a manner, it says, Nafal pachad Yehudim aleim. The fear of the Jews went to all of the people around. And everything starts with learning Torah. Because the very first decree Haman made was not to learn Torah. And it says the very first thing the Jews celebrated before Tefillin, before Bris Milah, before Yom Tiv was learning Torah. The foundation of how we can get through Galus is through learning Torah, and that's what gives light into a Jewish house. Of course, Tefillin as well. It's also important to people to check the mezuzahs and Tefillin every once in a while. But the Jews reaccepted the Torah during the time of the Megillah. Another thing, the Hal Yom Tov is called Purim. Purim is not a Hebrew word. It's actually a Persian word. And the reason why it's in Persian, because the name of something shows on the essence of the thing. And even though Mordechai and Esther were so great in the king's palace, nevertheless, they themselves realized that it's not our connections which will save us. Rather, it's us doing teshuvah to Hashem, knowing how we could sackcloth, ashes, fasting, and that's what got rid of the decree against the Jewish people. So the name Purim is a name of galus, a name of exile. Even when we're in time of exile, we act in a way that a Jew should act, and that's why it's not a Hebrew name, because it shows the uniqueness of Purim. The uniqueness of Purim, or every other Yom Tov, besides for Hanukkah, was done at a time when the Jews were saved. Hashem took us out of Egypt. We celebrate Pesach Sukkot for the clouds. Every Yom Tif was when the Jews were not in Gullus, except for Hanukkah and Purim, which the uniqueness of it is that even in such a situation as we were, we still stood very, very strong to go in the ways of Hashem. And that's why it's in the Persian, not Hebrew, in order to say the uniqueness of Purim. And that's why when Mashiach comes, it says the other holidays will be batul. Batul means nullified. They'll be around, but they won't be a particular significance when Mashiach comes, because every day will be great. You know, so Soviet Russia, for them, when they got a banana or they got an orange, it was a Yom Tiv. They got it once every couple of years. They would get an orange or a banana, right? Or a pineapple was like something once in a lifetime, right? And you go to somebody and say, "We're going to serve you pineapple tonight." And, you know, come to my house for pineapple. Your friend's not going to come over, right? So when Mashiach comes, the holidays, Yom Tovim, will still be there, but will be so great every day that it will be not significant. But Purim and Hanukkah will still be significant. It will be great holidays. Even because of the revelation of the godliness. How even when we're in exile, we'll continue. 1150. No, we'll do just the next three lines in the Gemara. It says, "Uvavoya lefnei hamelech." So here, if you see in the Megillah, where the Jews rested from their enemies and they made Purim on 13 on the 5th. And accept what they began to do, the poor, which is the resource of the above the before the king. Amar Ima Sefer, the king said, Yoshuv machshavta ra'a, let the evil thought, asher chashav al Yehudim, which he thought, which Haman devised against the Jews on his head, hang Haman and his sons on the gallows. Says the Gemara, when she came in front of the king, she is when Esther came in front of the king. Gemara asks, Omar Ima Sefer. Seemingly should have said, Haman's decree should go back on his head, and Haman's and his sons should be killed, because the king told Esther, tell the scribes whatever you want. Why does it say Amar Ima Sefer? The king said, let the scribe say. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan, the reason why it says Amar, that he said, the king said, and not Amra, that she said, even though the king told Esther to tell the scribes whatever she wants. The king said, I want you to read out loud what was written. Don't just write it down and put it in the encyclopedia and put it on the shelf. I want you to go and to read out loud the story of what happened, meaning this is the first Purim, and the king is saying, I want you to read the Megillah to everybody. The first Purim. The second Purim, Mordechai and Esther said the Jews should read the Megillah every year. But the first year, Achashverosh said, you should read the Megillah. read this, you wrote it down. I want it to be read out loud to all the Jews. They should know what Haman wanted to do and how a miracle happened, how I saved them, but how they were saved.
It doesn't say right out that Achashverosh was as bad as Haman though, in the Megillah.
It doesn't say that straight out, correct? And
Even though this is like underneath the surface.
correct. If you look at the having trouble with the connection, I'm sorry. I have good Wi-Fi here. So if you read the Megillah, it's sort of like a connection. It says, and the Jews took upon themselves, it's like a flow, what they commenced to do, what Mordechai had written to them, that Haman was killed. And when they came in front of the king, this is all part of the series, the flow of what was said. Another important point to bring out over here is they blamed Achashverosh wanted to take the credit for giving the order to kill Haman and his sons. On the other hand, as well, it's not just taking the credit, it's also taking the blame. Because you never know. Achashverosh is very fickle. He changes his mind very often. Achashverosh might one day wake up, look at his chronicles, look at the Megillah. Hey, Mordechai, Esther, you commanded to kill so many soldiers, so many people, 75,000 plus 500, plus Haman and his 10 sons. It's all Mordechai's fault. Sam Sefer says, for an anti-Semite, Sam Sefer, he was a Rav in Pittsburgh. You know, even though he had Franz Joseph, a very good king to the Jews, he had to fight with Napoleon, but still, the Chassam Sofer was very aware exactly the plight of the Jews at that time, and we'll see later on. It says when Esther told the Chacham, told the sages, write down the Megillah, and they said we don't want to do it. One of the reasons was you're making anti-Semitism. You know, Jews are making a big deal. You know, let us sort of sweep this under the rug. No, you should not make anti-Semitism here. The nations shouldn't get jealous of us. So Hashem put in Achashverosh's heart that he should be the one to write it down. Achashverosh, Amar, he said. Achashverosh was the one taking the blame and taking the credit. That people could say it's no longer Mordechai and Esther who did it, but rather it was Achashverosh who was the one who commanded to hang Mordechai. And the Pasuk wants to hint us this thing. You shouldn't be jealousy from the nations. And therefore Hashem made it in Achashverosh's heart that there should be the one that he should command them to kill Haman and his sons. Also, whenever we say Melech, king in the Megillah, it's going on Hashem. It says Malka Shloim, we said the king couldn't sleep. We said before in the Gemara, it's going on Hashem. So when Esther told the Chachamim, the sages, write the Megillah, and they said, you're going to make jealousy, and she said, but I'm already written down in the chronicles of Persia and Media, and over there, there's no need because it's already too late. They already will be jealous. But you'll see that if you read over there, that it was a king who did it, not that it was a king who commanded Haman to be killed, and the king who said it should be written. And they won't become jealous.